My sister mocked me in front of the whole family for failing. But karma hit her hard, and now she's homeless. The mocktail glass caught the chandelier's glint just right, refracting the golden light like some smug beacon in her hand. She stood poised, the queen of the moment, a flawless blend of designer silk and ego, her red lipstick curved into that insufferably perfect smile, the kind of smile that didn't need teeth to cut. She turned slightly, aligning her shoulders like she was on a runway, and with a delicate clink of glass, she lifted her goblet, eyes sweeping over the table, landing, of course, on me. "At least I'm not like some people," she said, her tone laced with coffee and venom, her voice a silken dagger sliding between ribs. "Still chasing dreams with absolutely nothing to show for it." The table broke like cheap glass. Laughter erupted, the kind that bubbles over not because something is funny, but because everyone's afraid to be the only one not laughing. Uncle Greg chuckled behind his tea, shaking his head in mock sympathy. Cousin Elise covered her mouth with a manicured hand, clearly relishing the drama. Even Dad let out a brief snort before returning to his roast beef, as if nothing had been said at all. The noise settled around me like smoke from a cheap cigar. Thick, choking, impossible to ignore. I didn't flinch. I didn't respond. Not a word. I just sat back, allowing the silence to bloom around me like a shield. It wasn't cowardice. It wasn't shame. It was strategy. Because words I'd learned were only ammunition if you used them wisely. And right now, silence was my loaded gun. I met her gaze for half a second, just enough to let her know I'd heard, just enough to let her see that she hadn't landed a kill shot. Then I returned to my plate, slicing through my food like I was carving her arrogance into digestible pieces. They didn't know what I knew. The business I'd been grinding over for the past 3 years, the one they mocked at every family dinner, called a pipe dream and a hobby, had just landed its 3rd client in a row. Not small-time gigs either. These were real contracts, real checks with real zeros, the kind of progress you don't scream about until it's cemented in your bank account. I'd lived on stale coffee and broken furniture, coded until my fingers cramped, pitched to people who barely looked up from their phones, and now, finally, the foundation was no longer sinking. It was holding, growing, rising. Meanwhile, she, the glittering socialite they toasted like royalty, was balancing her entire existence on the crumbling facade of borrowed status. Her bags were designer, but maxed-out credit cards lined every one. Her Instagram-perfect lifestyle? A mosaic of lies held together by filters and afterpay. That penthouse she bragged about endlessly? The landlord had finally stopped waiting on overdue payments. And the car? Leased under an LLC that hadn't filed taxes in 2 years. I knew all this, not because I'd gone digging, but because life has a way of peeling back the layers when no one's paying attention. A shared acquaintance here, a mutual friend there. You'd be amazed what falls into your lap when you keep your mouth shut and your ears open. She thought she was untouchable. She thought my silence meant surrender. But truth has a schedule, and karma's punctual. 6 months slid by. The family dinners continued, though she stopped attending. Excuses mostly. Business trip. 1 month. Too busy. The next. Then came silence. No posts, no stories, no updates from her curated world. Just digital cobwebs on her formerly glamorous feed. And then, on a Tuesday soaked with rain, she showed up. She was barely a silhouette in the downpour, her once perfect hair plastered to her skull, makeup smeared down her cheeks like melted confidence. She stood there on my porch, soaked through, clinging to 2 overstuffed duffel bags that looked more like survival kits than luggage. Her designer heels, mud-caked and cracked at the sole, sank slightly into the welcome mat. I opened the door slowly, the warmth of my apartment yawning into the chill behind her. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Her eyes darted behind me, scanning the place she hadn't visited in over a year. A home she'd once called depressing, under her breath. "Just until I figure things out," she whispered, her voice brittle, like if she spoke any louder it might shatter her entirely. She looked different, not just the smeared makeup and limp hair. There was something in her eyes. That glossy arrogance, that weaponized charm. It was gone. In its place was someone hollowed out, humbled by something cruel and unavoidable. Life had finally taught her the lesson I never could. Without a word, I turned and reached into the drawer near the door. When I returned, I handed her something. Crisp, folded, printed in color. A brochure for the local women's shelter. Her hands didn't move at first. She just stared at it like it was written in fire. When she finally took it, her fingers brushed mine, cold and trembling. I met her eyes, not with rage or cruelty, not even with satisfaction. Just clarity. Because she had made my pain entertainment, turned my struggle into a punchline for applause. She had dragged me across the coals in front of the people I once trusted to protect me. And now, life had handed her the same script with her name penciled in. The only difference? I wasn't going to clap. She turned slowly, the paper still in her grip like a fragile lifeline, and walked back down the steps. I didn't call after her, didn't offer a coat or a ride. I just watched the rain swallow her up, the mist curling around her figure like judgment. As the door clicked shut, I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel joy. I felt calm. Karma had a way of speaking without words. And tonight, it had spoken loud enough for both of us. The night dragged long after I closed the door. The rain kept up its steady tattoo against the windows like a reminder that not everything outside could be shut out. My apartment, small, minimal, efficient, felt heavier somehow, as though her presence on the doorstep had left a residue in the air. I didn't turn the lights back on, just sat there in the half shadow of the street lamp filtering through the blinds, the silence so deep it felt alive, coiling through every corner, brushing past the shelves, leaning against the walls. I didn't replay the moment in my head, not out of detachment, but because it didn't need replaying. It had crystallized perfectly the first time. The image of her drenched, stripped of her curated elegance, holding that brochure like it was the last thing tethering her to dignity. For a second, just a breath, I'd wondered if I should soften. Let her in. Offer her the couch, maybe a blanket, a dry change of clothes. But then I remembered the dining room, the tea, the laughter, her voice cutting through the chatter like a scalpel. The way she hadn't even had the decency to cloak her contempt in subtlety. She'd wanted to break me in front of them, not just shame me. No, that would have been too tame for her. She wanted annihilation, to watch me fold, disappear, drown in the weight of their scorn. So no, there was no couch waiting, no warmth, no comfort. Let her learn what it feels like to be the punchline. The following day passed in an unsettling quiet. I worked, answered emails, reviewed project scopes, but my focus lagged behind. Every time I glanced at the corner of the living room, I saw her standing there again. Not the version she'd built for public consumption, not the airbrushed illusion, but the raw, cracked version that had surfaced on my doorstep. And despite myself, a part of me itched, not out of pity, but curiosity. What did it take to unravel her? What disaster, what chain of bad decisions finally pulled the mask from her face? By evening, I got my answer. A knock. Not forceful, not desperate, just 3 short taps. I let it sit there for a while, let her stew in the uncertainty. Then I rose, unlocked the door, and opened it just wide enough to see her standing exactly where she had been before. Only this time, dry. Changed. She'd washed her face, thrown on a hooded sweatshirt too big for her frame, sleeves swallowing her hands. The bags were gone. Her hair, damp but not drenched, clung to her jawline. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice rough, like sandpaper dragged across years of pride. I didn't step aside, didn't invite her in. But I didn't close the door either. She took it as a yes, or maybe just a thin crack of tolerance, and leaned against the doorframe, hugging her arms to her chest like she was trying to hold herself together. "You were right," she began, eyes not meeting mine. "Everything collapsed. The apartment, the car, the cards, all of it, one by one." She let out a soft laugh, humorless and dry. "I kept thinking it's just a dip, a rough patch. One more swipe, one more lie, and I'd buy myself time. But time runs out." I stayed silent, arms folded across my chest. "You want to know what broke first?" she asked, looking up finally, eyes tired, skin pale. "The car. Someone keyed it. Probably the guy I owed $2,000. Then the repo company came. I stood in the parking lot watching them tow it like it was an exhibit. The doorman didn't even pretend not to stare. Another hollow chuckle, then a pause. "I haven't eaten properly in 2 days," she said, almost like a confession. "I slept at the bus station last night, curled up on a bench behind a vending machine. Classy, right?" Still, I said nothing. "I was horrible to you," she continued, quieter now. "I mocked your work, belittled your choices. I thought I was winning. I really did. And now? I don't even recognize the girl who stood in that dining room laughing at you." I didn't interrupt her. Her words weren't for me. They were for herself, a public apology with no audience. Finally, I spoke. "Why come here? You've burned every bridge. You made it very clear what you thought of me." She didn't flinch. "Because you're the only one who never hit back. Not once. You just endured. I didn't understand it before, but now I do. That kind of silence, it's power." A long pause stretched between us. The city buzzed faintly in the distance. Cars, sirens, the rhythmic pulse of a world that didn't care whether she had shelter or not. I tilted my head. "And what exactly do you want now?" She swallowed hard. "Not money, not a place to stay. I know that door's closed. I came because I needed you to see me as I am now, not the illusion I sold. Just me." Her voice cracked on that last word, and she looked away quickly, blinking too fast. "People think karma comes fast," I said, tone even, deliberate. "But it doesn't. It waits, it watches, and when it arrives, it doesn't knock. It kicks the door down." She nodded. And it did. Neither of us said anything for a long moment. The wind lifted her hair. She didn't try to fix it. "You should go," I said eventually, stepping back slightly. She didn't argue, didn't cry or beg, just nodded again, turned, and walked off into the dark with the same quiet dignity she'd always faked so well. Except this time, it was real, earned through fire. I shut the door again. No drama, no thunderclap, just the soft click of closure, not an ending, just another beat in a story that wasn't finished. 3 weeks passed. I didn't see her, didn't hear a word. No texts, no calls, not even a shadow caught in the corner of my eye. The city swallowed her whole, just like it does with everyone eventually. People come here thinking they'll carve out an empire and end up dissolving into the concrete, another set of footsteps washed away by rain and time. But something stayed behind. Not her bags, not her voice. Just a ghost of memory, thick in the walls. When I passed the front door at night, I'd remember her standing there, all mascara and humiliation, too proud to cry and too broken to hide. I'd hear her voice, soft like the static between radio stations, saying she hadn't eaten, that she'd slept behind a vending machine, that she finally understood the power of silence. But understanding wasn't the same as change. One rainy morning, almost poetic in its dreariness, I got a letter in the mail. Not an email, not a text or some passive-aggressive post. A real letter, envelope slightly torn at the corner, postmarked from a nearby shelter I recognized by name. Inside, her handwriting curved across the page, neat but strained. There was no greeting. No "dear brother" or "hey." Just ink on paper, desperate and final. "I'm leaving the city," it began. "No one will say it out loud, but I know I've become the cautionary tale everyone whispers about. I see it in their eyes when I walk into a room, the fear that they'll end up like me, that everything they're building is as fragile as glass, and one wrong move will shatter it all. I used to mock that fear. Now I wear it like skin." She went on, admitting things I never thought she had the self-awareness to face. How she lied about her jobs, how the money she flashed around at family dinners wasn't hers to spend, how she felt the success slipping through her fingers months before that toast at the table, but had already built her identity so high on hollow praise that she didn't know how to climb down without crashing. "It was easier," she wrote, "to laugh at you than face myself." A beat of silence followed in the letter, blank lines, intentional, like she'd needed to stop writing just to breathe. "I know you won't forgive me," she continued. "I'm not even asking for it. I don't deserve it, but I wanted to say it, plainly, before I go. You were right to shut the door. You were right to give me nothing. That silence you held, it wasn't weakness, it was grace." I read the letter 3 times, once with indifference, once with bitterness, and once with something quieter than both. Not sympathy, not even closure, just truth. A week later, I visited the shelter. Not for her, for myself. I wanted to make sure she wasn't still lingering like some unresolved thread, but she was gone. Left 2 days before, they told me. No forwarding address, no dramatic exit, just one duffel bag, half-packed, and a quiet goodbye. That was the end of it. No cinematic confrontation. No explosive argument. No miracle reconciliation where we cried into each other's shoulders and rewrote history with hugs. Just a departure. She disappeared in the same way her arrogance had, without ceremony. And I kept going. My business grew. Modestly, steadily. The clients came not in floods, but in steady streams. Real people, real projects. I moved out of that small apartment 6 months later into a loft overlooking the skyline. Not luxurious, not flashy, but mine. Bought, not leased. Paid for by every hour I'd spent grinding when no one was watching, when they laughed and pointed and she toasted my failure. At the next family gathering, the air shifted. The chair where she used to sit remained empty, though no one mentioned it directly. The laughter came more cautiously. The jokes were gentler, as if they'd all aged a decade in the span of a year. My father gave me a strange look across the table. Not quite proud, not quite ashamed. Just humbled. Maybe he saw it now. Maybe he saw what I'd carried in silence all those years while they fed her ego like it was gospel. Elise approached me during dessert. Her voice was quiet, almost embarrassed. "I heard about your expansion," she said. "That's amazing." I nodded. "Thanks. You've done well," she added, like it hurt to admit. I didn't need their praise anymore. I didn't need their approval, because I'd built something she never could. Not just a business, not just stability, but resilience. A kind of quiet, unshakable self-worth that couldn't be mocked, couldn't be diminished by a toast or a smirk. And that was the true revenge. Not the silence, not the brochure, not the locked door, but the fact that I didn't need to watch her fall to rise. She faded. I endured. That night I returned to my loft and took out her letter again. The paper had yellowed slightly at the corners. The ink smudged where my fingers had touched it too many times. I read it one last time under the soft lamplight, then folded it slowly, methodically. I didn't throw it away, but I didn't keep it close either. I placed it in a box with old invoices, past contracts, the physical record of everything I'd built from nothing. A quiet burial, not of her, but of the part of me that once needed her to see me win. Now, I no longer needed her to see anything at all. Her chapter was closed. Mine was still being written, page by steady page, and this time no one else held the pen.